right, so the quarterback debate has been, I mean, it's been going on for a couple years if you think about it, between, CJ and Bryce Young, and even before that, like, is the pressure bigger for a first overall pick than a second overall pick at quarterback? I made a stitch talking about this between Cam and Shedeur and how I think Shedeur might be more successful because he's used to the pressure of not having an O-line. Obviously, Cam has infinite potential, but I think he's going to be less equipped if he gets taken at first overall to the Titans, who just have terrible pass protection. Who do you think is the number one quarterback in this draft?
I think it's got to be Shedeur. I mean, he's overcome arguably the most in college football over the last 2 years. Ever since he became a Buffalo and left Jackson State, I mean, he's been dealing with a terrible O-line, which is pretty typical in the NFL nowadays. I mean, he's had weapons around him, but, it's been a lot of dysfunction in Colorado. They've had to rebuild, one of the worst programs in the country, and him and Coach Prime have done that. They're one of the more successful programs of the last 2 years. Making a bowl this past year was a big step for them, and specifically with Shedeur, I mean, he's not the most mobile quarterback in this draft, but you're not really asking him to. I mean, he's more of a surgical, accurate passer, and I believe he set the record this past year with completion percentage. I think it was up to like 77%, which is just absurd. If you're just asking a guy to sit back there and slice up a defense and take what the defense has given him, I think Shedeur is by far the best prospect. I think people underrate his arm quite a bit. I think he's got a very strong one. I think he can put it anywhere he wants on the field. And he's very smart upstairs. I mean, he's worked with guys like Tom Brady. He knows what it takes to win, and he knows when he has to create out of structure. And, we see a knock on Caleb Williams from last year being like, maybe he creates out of structure a little too much, and maybe he needs to stick a little bit more to the X's and O's and stay in the pocket and deliver. And we see him in the NFL, and that just wasn't his game. So I think Shedeur is, opposite in that sense. I think he's a little better equipped in the pocket than Caleb was, and I think he's able to create just enough out of structure that if he's able to escape from NFL bodies and is just athletic enough to do that, I think he'll have a lot of success in this league.
And that said, I mean, most mocks that I see do not have him going first overall or even as the first quarterback. And with that in mind, maybe he does get decent protection. If he falls to pick 3 in New York, it's not really going to be much better. But there are a handful of top 10 teams that look a lot more favorable than the Tennessee Titans or the New York Giants. With the Raiders being one of them. I've loved Shedeur to the Raiders way, way prior to the Raiders losing that first overall pick. And, it still has always seemed like a possibility to me with the Tom Brady connection. I really feel like there could be, a last-minute move before the draft to make it happen, or maybe they put out some articles and try to tank his stock. But in any case, I don't think it's unlikely that Shedeur ends up a Raider or that Shedeur ends up being, one of the top quarterbacks in this draft, if not the top.
How far apart is the gap, you'd say, between him and Cam?
I mean, I think first-year success, Shedeur clears by a noticeable but not wide margin. Long-run potential, I think it's pretty equivocal. These aren't the most generational prospects we've ever seen, but in both cases, they're not lacking anything in their skill set. I think they meet the needs of the teams that are likely going to take them.
So we briefly mentioned before, their lack of willingness to participate in the combine. Who of these two quarterbacks do you think it's more detrimental to?
I really expected that Cam was not going to opt out when Shedeur did, for the sake of Cam securing that first quarterback and potentially first overall. I think he had the most to gain. I don't think Shedeur had a lot to lose. I think his game really spoke for itself. But Cam, coming from Miami, coming from the ACC, I think it was kind of expected that he was going to need to show out at the combine to rise. And just with the narrative of both of them opting out, it kind of seems like Cam's still favored to be the first quarterback taken. I don't really think Shedeur lost out, though. I think, he protected his image well. He spoke well in interviews and in meetings, and I think whoever takes Shedeur has still got a superstar quarterback in the pipeline.
I think if, either of these quarterbacks were to fall, you look back at the 2021 draft with Pickett and, just a lack of talent in that draft, and so a lot of them fell to the second, third, fourth round. But not saying that either of these quarterbacks will fall that far, but maybe instead of getting picked at 1 or 3, Shedeur maybe falls to like pick 8 with the Jets, or Cam Ward falls to pick 8. Do you think, a team like that has some defensive pieces, has some weapons like Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, how much more successful do you see a guy, falling that far down in the first round being?
Yeah, I mean, we look at a team like Atlanta that was not a terrible roster the year prior to taking Penix and signing Kirk Cousins, but they put themselves in a position where, with their fresh free agent quarterback and also their rookie quarterback, they were equipped to win well. They were a good team that underperformed severely, so they were in the position to take a quarterback. With the Vikings, they also underperformed due to Kirk's injuries, but they also traded up to the position to draft J.J. McCarthy, and while we didn't see him take the field last year, Sam Darnold was still equipped very well to win games. I think if either of these guys fall to 8 or 9, they're going to be very successful year one. I just don't really anticipate it. So I think it will have some effects on these guys' careers for the first couple years.
Okay. Me personally, my QB3 in this draft is Jalen Milroe, strictly because of the athletic upside. The guy's got as big of an arm as anybody in this draft, and the only comparison to his legs, in my opinion, is Lamar Jackson. Like, he's able to outrun Georgia defenders when almost nobody else in the country can, and get the edge and run all over teams. It's just the short accuracy stuff and the timing, the little things that...
It's like an Anthony Richardson with an Alabama quarterback IQ.
Yes. And so with that being said, he's my QB3 in this draft. You've seen guys like Jackson Dart really start to rise on people's draft boards. Is there somebody in this draft that you have your eyes on?
No, I would probably say Milroe has been my number 3 pick, but Dylan Gabriel has also been another one to watch out for, just for the sake of, he did run the most successful regular season system in CFB. And with that in mind, you just can't rule him out. Very similar to J.J. McCarthy coming from the Natty Championship, Michigan.
And I'll give you a better one. I mean, look at Bo Nix coming from that same system. Gabriel has a bunch of big game experience, being a former Oklahoma Sooner and now an Oregon Duck. They had a lot of success this year. He had a bunch of statistical success. He was one of the best quarterbacks in college football this year. So I wouldn't be mad at a late first, early second round pick for him either. I think he'd be in the right system. I think he'd be a very successful quarterback.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this quarterback class is better than people give it credit for. Next year we're looking ahead at a long list of system quarterbacks, but other than Arch Manning, who's really generational from next year's class. I think next year's class is overrated because there's more names, not because there's necessarily better names. There's some really good talent here if you pick it in the right time. The same way Jalen Hurts was a second or third rounder from Alabama to the Eagles, who already had a quarterback. Like, if you're looking at a team with an expiring quarterback situation, maybe even in LA. I know, we're going to talk about Matt Stafford a little bit later, and they just extended him, but they could still look to develop a guy right now and just get a system quarterback and have Stafford slowly hand over the reins to him. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I agree.